Hi everybody. I hope everyone's enjoying a relaxing and productive summer. This week I wanted to share with you several ideas that I think will be helpful and inspiring both in terms of our everyday tefillah as well as in terms of preparation for Tisha B'Av, which is right around the corner. When we daven Shemona Esrei every day, we come upon in the middle, toward 2/3 of the way through, into what we would call a bracha of transition. And that's the bracha for kibbutz galiot, the bracha that we all know, Tekah b'shofar gadol l'cheretenu. I've been reading a beautiful sefer on tefillah by Rav Ezra Bick from the Gush, and he really explores this bracha in depth. And I want to share with you just one or two insights that I think can be very meaningful for our lives, specifically today. He asks several questions on the lashon of the bracha, and he says, just to share two with you, he says, what does it mean to Tekah shofar gadol l'cheretenu? What is this great shofar that we ask Hashem to blow to gather us all in? And what does it mean l'cheretenu? Meaning, certainly today, where we speak from a perspective of Jews living in freedom in so many, throughout the world. So tefillah for us every day needs to be meaningful and relevant. What does it mean that we're asking Hashem to bring us together within our freedom? Right? Two very good, interesting, compelling questions. So I'd like to start off by giving a context to this bracha, that within the bracha of Shemona Esrei, until now, all of the brachot are said in the singular. And now all of a sudden, we ramp things up. We're speaking in the plural. And in fact, this bracha of Tekah b'shofar gadol l'cheretenu is the first in a series of brachot that talk about the process of geula. The next several brachot, one after the next, after the next, after the next. After we have this, we'll talk about the idea of living in a society of tzedek and mishpat. We talk about the idea of course, V'liyerushalayim ircha b'rachmim tashuv. We talk about the idea of reestablishing Malchut Beit David. So what is this bracha, again, to just sum up with a third question, this bracha of bringing us back together, is it even really necessary? Because isn't it obvious that we all want to be together? So to start off, let's talk about what does it mean when we ask Hashem to blow the great shofar to bring us in. What is this great shofar? So Rav Bick brings a beautiful idea, and he says, the great shofar that we're talking about is not a shofar of technicalities. It's not a shofar that we're going to blow as sort of like to change everyone's geography. The shofar gadol that we're talking about is a shofar that's transformative in terms of the essence of Bnei Israel and the relationship between how Teva interacts with Hashem in the world. In other words, the shofar gadol, of course, that we're speaking about is going to be the shofar that signals the transition from the current time into the Yemot HaMashiach. And in fact, of all tefillot that he could quote, and this makes so much sense, he goes on to discuss the section of shofrot that we all know so well from the Rosh Hashanah davening. And he talks about, of all the, I'll share with you that I think of all the sections of the Tefillat Musaf, it's so beautiful. I remember, thinking as a kid, what is the deal with this shofrot section? And not 100% understanding how to make heads or tails of it. Malchut, you understand, you're talking about Hashem as the Melech of the world. Even Zichrono, you talk about the idea of God having an accounting for everything we do, and the significance of that if God is keeping a record of what we do, then of course our actions are significant. But why do I need all these psukim about the shofar? And so what we see is the importance of the shofar in the life of Klal Yisrael. That the shofar, if you look even at that, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit to Rosh Hashanah time, but it's never too early, that the shofar, first we read about the shofar at Matan Torah. That's the significance of the shofar in the past. That was when Bnei Israel was transformed from a group of people that had left Mitzrayim into Am Yisrael. Then we have the idea of the experience of the shofar, our relationship for the shofar, of how we would use the shofar in the Mikdash. We would use the shofar in our day-to-day life. And then, of course, the third section is about how the shofar will herald in the Geula. So when we say to Hashem, Tekah b'shofar gadol L'cherutenu, we're saying, okay, Hashem, it's time to blow the shofar. But not just the shofar of battle, the shofar of Mashiach, the shofar of the Geula. And we know that will, when Bnei Israel hears that call, they'll all come together. And they won't just come together under any common purpose, but rather they'll come together for their ultimate purpose of doing Avodat Hashem. And when Bnei Israel come together to serve Hashem in this world, of course, that is when the tide of history will turn. So that's the Shofar Gadol. Now on top of that, we have this idea of Cherutenu, which again, the question I mentioned before. Why are we focusing on Cherut when we're living in a time where, quite frankly, we have Cherut? And Rav Bick brings down a beautiful, magnificent idea. He says, when you talk about a time of Geula, and when you talk about a time of Shibud, again, that doesn't necessarily always mean that someone's standing over you with a whip in their hand, the slave driver, the master, and the Eved. He says, any time Bnei Israel is scattered throughout the world, that is a period of Hester Panim, starting way back with the first Galut, right? Way back when in Galut Bavel, when the Mikdash was destroyed, and of course continuing to the second Beit HaMikdash being destroyed, Ad Hayom Hazeh. That any time that we're scattered throughout the world, that's Hester Panim. Things are not clear. Things are not obvious. The right path of what to do, it's hard for us to understand where to go with that. And so, when we talk about Hashem bringing Cherut into our lives, it might not be physical Cherut, like the Cherut that we talk about at the Pesach Seder, but rather it's a sense of sort of a spiritual breather, right? Spiritual Cherut, where we can say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we need to be together. Because when we're not together, it's very, very hard for us as a nation, and it's very hard for us as your children to do your Vatzon. And so we ask Hashem, Tekah b'shofar gadol l'cherutenu. It's to bring us together in such a way that we will be able to serve Hashem, but also appreciate and value being together, because that Achdut in Bnei Israel is what real freedom is all about. And I think that is certainly something that's so telling in our times today. I think that in these difficult times for Klal Yisrael, and of course the juxtaposition, I mean, there's no coincidences in this world, that we're in the time of the 9 days. Tisha B'Av is right around the corner. We're approaching Shabbat Chazon. And we're living in a time where we really are davening with all our might, and there's a lot of Hester Panim, and there's a lot of confusion. But on the other hand, there's this beautiful notion, this beautiful spark of hope of Achdut. Many of you know that I'm in America for the summer, and it is beautiful and wonderful to be able to spend this time with my family, with our family. But something that's hard is that to be away from the center of Klal Yisrael. Every day when I look at my email, I am astounded about how many, on all the Beit Shemesh email lists, there are things from the most, beautiful philosophical ideas. We're having Limud Torah every night for the Seder. We're having Limud Torah every night for the soldiers. We're having a Parshathon, a Mishnathon. We're saying Tehillim all night. We're baking Chal and taking brachot. To things that are even more mundane. The soldiers need supplies. They need deodorant. They need food. We're baking cookies. We're bringing lasagnas. But there's this real sense of Achdut, everyone coming together to help. Right? And it doesn't matter what hashkafa you are. It doesn't matter if you are, the Jew who is not observant, who is, sending your child to babysit the children of a soldier who's in the field so that his wife gets a break, to someone who's learning full-time in yeshiva where they canceled the Bein Hazmanim vacation because they felt like, no, this is a time not to go on vacation, but for everyone in Bnei Israel to be learning Torah for each other and for the zechuyot that entails. And if I can end with one final idea, that we talk about this idea of Tekah b'shofar gadol cherutenu. As I mentioned before, we have a question. Why does this need its own separate bracha? And I think that the answer is, again, based on what I read from Rav Bick, is that because this idea of Achdut and Klal Yisrael is so crucial, so vital, so important, It doesn't matter where we are as long as we're together. We're a family. And such a unique idea that's brought down by Rav Mirsky in Hegunei Halacha, one of my favorite ideas, is this idea that there's something unique Bnei Israel can do. When you have 10 people, 10 men from Bnei Israel that are standing in a room, they're not called 10 individual men anymore. They're called a klal. They're called an Eidah. They're called a tzibur. They transform from their individual roles into something that's a community. No matter whether it's 10 men, 100, 1,000, a million. It doesn't matter. We transform into a community. And that's something that's so beautiful and so important in this time. To remember that each of us is an individual, but we're all linked to each other. And as a practical take-home idea, how can I strengthen that link? By doing for my neighbor. That this is the time. If I want to be part of that tzibur, so I need to pick up a tehillim and say some tehillim for the soldiers. I need to do a chesed for a family in my community that needs something right now. Whether it's in America or in Israel, it doesn't matter. But if I want to be linked to the tzibur, that special community of Klal Yisrael, I need to put myself in the center of it. And it's my bracha to all of us that in these days, we increase our chesed, we increase our avat Yisrael, we increase our achdut, and that this is the last Tisha B'Av. Maybe Tisha B'Av will be even this year a day that's transformed into a day of sason and simcha. But if l'tzarenu it is not, that this is the last Tisha B'Av where we will be sitting on the floor, because by next year we will have heard the call of the great shofar beckoning us all home. Shabbat Shalom.